So, it is exactly 1 hour before noon in Washington, D.C.
Right.
The stage is completely set, the pens are neatly lined up on the Resolute desk, and a highly anticipated veto-proof, historically bipartisan housing bill is, right about to become the law of the land.
Mm.
And then, literally without warning, the president just pulls the emergency brake.
Just completely abruptly.
Canceled. The signing ceremony is done.
Right.
And his demand. The immediate passage of an entirely unrelated, highly controversial voting bill.
Yeah.
No preamble, just the sudden high-stakes collision of housing costs and voting rights playing out in real time.
It's wild.
It really is. And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive for you.
Right.
Our mission here is to just cut through the partisan spin and look strictly at the blueprints of this standoff.
Because there's a lot of spin.
Oh, absolutely. So we've pulled together the actual legislative texts for both the Road to Housing Act and the Save America Act.
Along with, the congressional press releases and all the breaking news transcripts.
Exactly, just to figure out the actual mechanics of what just happened and the resulting fracture within the Senate. And, without taking any political sides.
Right, just the facts.
If you enjoy content like this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications so you'll always know when new content is released.
And before we get to the fallout, just a quick mandatory update on the Martin Stevens versus OpenAI matter.
Yeah.
It is still not a lawsuit. Stevens suspended his quiet period after OpenAI's confidential S-1 filing on June 8th, 2026, without engaging with him.
Right.
He won't re-enter a quiet period without a formal agreement. No settlement talks are confirmed. The dead man's switch has not been activated, and he remains safe.
Okay, so with that housekeeping out of the way, let's look at the actual architecture of this legislative showdown.
Let's do it.
Because before we can understand why the machinery of Washington just ground to a halt, you really need to understand the sheer momentum of what was sitting on the president's desk.
Oh, for sure.
We're talking about the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. And looking at the whip counts in our sources, the math here is almost jarring for this era of politics.
Jarring is definitely the right word.
Yeah.
We are looking at a final tally of 85-5 in the Senate.
Wow.
Yeah. And 358-32 in the House.
That's insane.
It is. That is a veto-proof, overwhelming bipartisan supermajority.
Which you just don't see anymore.
Never. When you see numbers like that today, it usually means Congress is naming a post office.
Right.
Or, passing some non-binding resolution.
Right.
So to see those margins on a substantive economic package addressing, like, one of the most volatile sectors of the American economy, the housing market,
Yeah.
it really signals a rare alignment of panicked constituencies.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of the bill itself. The text shows a massive push to cut red tape to ease local housing construction.
To boost aggregate supply.
Exactly. But the absolute engine of this legislation, like the part that brought progressive Democrats like Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer to the same table as conservative Republicans, is this hard cap on institutional investors.
Yeah, that's the big one.
It specifically blocks any investment firm that already owns more than 350 homes from purchasing any additional existing single-family properties.
Right. And the underlying mechanism here, it targets the structural imbalance in the current real estate market.
Right, because over the last decade.
Exactly. Massive private equity firms have essentially industrialized the purchase of starter homes.
Yeah.
When a traditional family tries to buy a house, they're dealing with, mortgage pre-approvals, mandatory inspections.
30-day closing windows, all that.
Right. But an institutional firm comes in with an all-cash offer, they waive every inspection, and they close in a week.
It's impossible to compete.
They're absorbing the inventory to convert it into a permanent rental class, which, artificially constricts the supply of purchasable homes and drives up prices across the board.
Yeah, I was reading through the market data in our sources, and honestly, it feels like trying to buy a single ticket to a highly anticipated concert, right?
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. But you're competing against a scalper bot that can instantly purchase 10,000 tickets in a microsecond. Like, you don't even get to the checkout page. The 350 home cap in this bill is essentially putting a kepi siege on the American housing market to block the bots.
That's exactly what it's doing.
But my question is, doesn't this just, freeze the market?
How so?
Well, if Wall Street can't deploy capital into housing, doesn't that hurt overall development?
So that is the exact counterargument the financial sector lobbied heavily.
Oh, okay.
Which brings us to a highly specific, very intentional carve-out in the legislation for build-to-rent projects.
Build to rent.
Yeah. The bill doesn't ban Wall Street from real estate entirely.
Mm.
The restriction explicitly targets the hoarding of the existing housing supply.
Oh, I see.
Right. So if an institutional investor wants to deploy capital to physically construct brand new homes, meaning they're adding net new units to the overall supply.
Then they're totally free to do so.
Exactly. They are completely free to do that. The legislative logic is basically forcing that massive capital away from predatory acquisition
Yeah.
and channeling it toward productive construction.
Got it. Now, there is also this fascinating little jurisdictional quirk in the text here.
Oh, the digital currency thing.
Yes. The sources show the bill includes a temporary ban on the Federal Reserve issuing a central bank digital currency,
Yeah.
which, at first glance, a digital dollar has absolutely nothing to do with residential zoning or single-family homes.
No, nothing at all.
But looking at the committee routing, this all fell under the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs committees. So it became like a vehicle for other financial regulatory priorities.
Right. And, in a functioning legislative environment, that is just how massive compromise bills operate.
Yeah, everybody gets a little something.
Exactly. You have progressive priorities regarding housing equity merging with conservative priorities regarding central bank overreach.
Makes sense.
When an economic pressure point, like housing costs, starts impacting the core constituencies of every single senator, from, deep blue urban renters to deep red rural prospective buyers.
You actually get a piece of functional legislation.
You do.
A functional piece of legislation that was scheduled for a noon signing ceremony.
Yep.
Until the president's sudden pivot.
Which is wild.
He takes to Truth Social, publicly mocks Senator Warren, dismisses this massive multi-trillion-dollar housing market intervention as a, quote, minor bill, and just declares the signing canceled.
Yeah, he called the situation a national emergency.
Right, and demanded Congress pass the Save America Act. So why take a universally popular housing bill hostage?
Right.
I mean, the president's calculus here relies on the idea that the political pain of killing housing relief will force the Senate to swallow the Save Us Act.
Exactly. And to understand the audacity of that gamble, we have to look closely at the SAVE Act itself.
The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act.
Right. The stated top-line goal is to mandate strict documentary proof of United States citizenship to register to vote in federal elections.
Okay. And just to establish the baseline reality here, it is already illegal under federal law for non-citizens to vote in federal elections.
It is.
So looking at the text of the SAVE Act, they are attempting to solve an illegal voting problem that, according to massive amounts of state-level data, just doesn't statistically exist.
Right.
Which tells me this is purely a messaging bill designed for a campaign cycle.
Oh, it is absolutely a messaging bill. But, it's a messaging bill with highly destructive mechanical teeth at the state level.
How so?
Well, the legislation completely changes the threshold of proof required. Under the SAVE Act, an applicant must provide a real ID-compliant form of identification, a valid U.S. passport, or a combination of documents like a certified birth certificate alongside a separate government-issued photo ID.
Wow. Which completely changes the bureaucracy of registering.
Totally.
If you're an 18-year-old college student or, say, an elderly voter who hasn't driven in a decade, tracking down a certified birth certificate and getting a passport just to register is a massive logistical hurdle.
Huge hurdle.
And our sources point out it gets even more restrictive for mail-in voting.
It does. So the text requires physical photo ID for in-person voting, which, many states already do.
Right.
But for absentee or postal voting, the SAVE Act mandates that you submit a physical photocopy of that approved ID inside the envelope with your ballot.
A physical photocopy.
Yes. And when you think about the sheer number of Americans who no longer own home printers or photocopiers.
I mean, I don't have a printer.
Right. You're introducing this mechanical friction point that will inevitably lower turnout, particularly among specific demographics.
But, okay, the voting mechanics aren't even the most volatile part of the package.
No, they're not.
As I was going through the bill text, I hit a section that seemed entirely out of place.
The sports ban.
Yes. The SAVE Act includes specific provisions banning transgender women and men from competing in women's sports. How does a national ban on transgender athletes end up in a bill fundamentally about passport requirements and absentee ballots?
It's a great question.
Isn't this kind of breaking the traditional rules of legislative gravity?
Normally, yes.
Yeah.
But you have to look at the pure political strategy here.
Okay.
By attaching the transgender sports ban to voter ID and proof of citizenship, the architects of this bill are setting a very deliberate trap for the opposition.
Oh, I see.
They know Senate Democrats will categorically vote against the sports ban,
Right.
but the resulting campaign ads next fall, they won't mention sports.
Oh, wow.
The attack ads will simply say, Senator X voted against securing our elections and requiring proof of citizenship.
So the inclusion of the sports ban is essentially a poison pill.
Exactly.
It's a mechanism engineered to force a toxic vote. They're basically bundling highly emotional, base-motivating social issues into a single package to create an impossible litmus test.
Precisely. It is a package deal designed to rally a very specific political base, but simultaneously designed to be completely unpalatable to the Democratic opposition.
Right.
Which brings us to the procedural reality of why this hostage situation has paralyzed Washington. The SAFE Act has virtually zero chance of naturally securing 60 votes in the Senate.
Which is why the president didn't just demand the passage of the bill. He explicitly demanded on social media that Senate Republicans terminate the filibuster to force it through, and that demand has completely cracked the Senate GOP wide open.
The internal fracture here is severe, and our sources highlight that this isn't a new pressure campaign.
Really?
No. Back in December, the White House Legislative Affairs team spent an entire month quietly trying to whip the votes to abolish the legislative filibuster.
Wow. And they failed miserably.
Completely.
They had to abandon the effort because the votes simply were not there among their own Republican senators.
Right.
And now the president is dragging that internal failure out into the public square.
Yeah, he's making it public.
Senator John Thune has been incredibly blunt about this dynamic. He explicitly told the president on the record that the math does not exist to abolish the filibuster. They do not have 50 Republican senators willing to pull the trigger.
And this isn't just about stubbornness, It is about profound institutional anxiety.
What do you mean?
Well, you have a deep structural divide between senators who are facing immediate, aggressive primary challenges from their right flank and the traditionalist senators who are looking at the long-term survival of the institution.
Right, the ones who aren't in immediate danger.
Exactly. Many of whom are actually on their way out, like Tom Tillis and Bill Cassidy.
John Cornyn is the perfect case study for this tension, actually.
Absolutely.
Our sources spent a lot of time analyzing his trajectory. Historically, Cornyn has been a quintessential Senate institutionalist, like a fierce defender of the 60-vote threshold. But during his recent primary race against Ken Paxton, the political winds in Texas were blowing incredibly hard to the populist right. Cornyn was desperate for President Trump's endorsement, and during that primary heat, Cornyn actually signaled he was open to nuking the filibuster specifically to pass the SAVE Act.
Because in a primary environment, the currency of the realm is proving absolute loyalty to the base.
Right.
And to the president's immediate demands.
Yes, survival first.
Exactly. The long-term consequences to the Senate rulebook just become secondary to survival.
But then Cornyn lost the primary to Paxton anyway.
Right.
And now, freed from the pressure of the upcoming election, the sources describe Cornyn as a vocal Trump critic who is firmly back in the pro-filibuster camp.
It's a complete 180.
It really shows how wildly a senator's procedural principles can shift depending on whether they are appealing to a primary electorate, a general electorate, or looking at their historical legacy after a defeat.
Yeah. And, beyond an individual senator's legacy, there is a massive collective strategic fear among Republicans regarding the filibuster. If they cave to the president's pressure today, detonate the 60-vote rule, and pass the SAVE Act with 51 votes, they are fundamentally altering the physics of the Senate.
Right, Pandora's box.
Because what happens next year? If Democrats take control of the chamber, the filibuster is already gone.
Right.
Republicans would be handing their opposition the exact weapon needed to pass sweeping, controversial national legislation with a simple majority.
But wait, isn't this just the logical conclusion of the nuclear option from 2013?
What do you mean?
We've seen both parties cart out exceptions for judicial nominees and Supreme Court justices. At a certain point, doesn't the dam just break for all legislation?
Well, there's a vast difference in legislative mechanics between confirming a single judge and passing sweeping national laws that govern the economy, voting rights, and federal regulations.
Okay, that's fair.
A judge is a static appointment. Legislation requires implementation, funding, and state-level compliance.
Right, it's ongoing.
Exactly. If the filibuster falls for legislation, the United States fundamentally shifts toward a parliamentary system.
Wow.
Every time the Senate flips, The entire national legal framework regarding healthcare, taxes, civil rights. It would all be completely rewritten by a slim majority.
Just constant flip-flopping.
Yeah, the whiplash would destabilize the economy. That is the nightmare scenario that
Yeah.
traditionalist Republicans are trying to prevent.
So mechanically, where does this leave us right now?
Stuck.
We have the 21st Century Road to Housing Act sitting in absolute limbo. We have the Save America Act stalled out because a divided Republican Senate refuses to break their own rules. Let's look at the actual clock here. The president canceled the signing ceremony, but what happens if he officially issues a veto on the housing bill?
If he issues a formal veto, the bill is returned to Congress.
Okay.
And given the sheer math we discussed earlier,
The 85-5 in the Senate?
right, and 358 to 32 in the House, Congress possesses more than enough votes to easily override that veto.
So it becomes law anyway.
Effectively nullifying the president's objection, yes, making it law anyway.
But he hasn't vetoed it. He literally just walked away from the desk. Right.
So we're looking at the mechanics of the 10-day rule under Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution.
Correct. The 10-day rule dictates that if the president receives a bill and does absolutely nothing,
Like he doesn't sign it and he doesn't veto it?
right, the bill automatically becomes law after 10 working days, excluding Sundays.
Oh, wow.
The critical condition here is that Congress must still be in session. If Congress had adjourned, it would be a pocket veto, and the bill would die.
But Congress is in session.
They are in session.
So, if the president just runs down this 10-day clock, does he essentially engineer the best of both worlds for himself?
What do you mean?
Well, he gets to dominate the news cycle, complaining about the SAVE Act to rally his base. He looks like a fighter. And meanwhile, the massively popular Housing Relief Act quietly becomes law anyway without his signature, preventing a total economic backlash.
It is a plausible reading of the tactical landscape, I'll give you that.
Yeah?
But our sources from inside the Republican camp point out that this strategy carries a catastrophic electoral risk. Because of the midterms.
Exactly. We're heading into the midterms. Republican aides are privately warning that turning the SAVE Act into a do-or-die litmus test for election integrity might backfire horribly.
I see. Because if you spend the next 6 months telling your most loyal voters that the upcoming election is fundamentally rigged and unsecure unless the SAVE Act passes, and then the SAVE Act doesn't pass, you risk completely demoralizing your own base.
Right. You are essentially telling them their vote won't count.
Why would they bother showing up?
Exactly. Why would they? That is the exact internal panic right now.
Wow.
And meanwhile, the theatrics are providing massive amounts of fuel to the Democratic base.
Yeah.
Our sources feature quotes from prominent Democrats, like Jamie Raskin, who are openly hinting at aggressive accountability measures if they retake the House,
Like what?
including putting impeachment proceedings back on the table.
Wow. And that creates a perfect, terrifying mirror of the Republican risk.
Yes, it does.
For a Democrat trying to survive a primary challenge from the progressive left, promising aggressive accountability and impeachment is a highly effective way to motivate their base.
Ooh.
But the second you broadcast those intentions on national television, you hand the Republican base a terrifying existential reason to show up at the polls.
Exactly.
It ceases to be about policy. It becomes a pure arms race of base mobilization.
Which brings us to the ultimate decider in all of this,
The voters.
specifically the independent voters. The data in our sources points toward a massive demographic shift that is largely being ignored by both extremes.
Okay, tell me about that.
Take a crucial battleground state like North Carolina. The registration data shows that independent, unaffiliated voters now actually outnumber both registered Republicans and registered Democrats.
Wait, really?
Yeah, outnumber both.
That is an incredible data point. People are actively taking the time to opt out of the two-party binary. Why do you think that is?
Because they are exhausted by exactly the kind of procedural hostage-taking we are analyzing today. Analysts suggest these voters are watching a functional, universally supported housing bill.
A bill that would directly ease the financial pressure in their local neighborhoods, by the way.
Yes, getting hijacked for a polarized fight over transgender sports bans and filibuster mechanics.
Yeah.
The overwhelming consensus among the strategists quoted in our sources is that these independent voters just want a return to common sense governance.
Just fix things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They want the government to fix the roads, lower the cost of living, and stop the theatrics. Whichever party is perceived as straying furthest from that basic functional governance risks alienating the largest, fastest-growing voting bloc in the country.
And that really brings it all right back to you listening to this right now.
Mhm.
It is incredibly easy to view these Capitol Hill showdowns as just abstract DC drama, just suits yelling at each other on cable news networks.
Yeah, noise.
But the specific mechanisms we unpack today have direct, unavoidable consequences. Whether you are a young family hoping to buy a starter house in a market that is hopefully less crowded by massive Wall Street algorithms, or you are preparing to navigate new, highly restrictive documentation requirements just to exercise your right to vote, this is about your wallet and your civic life.
Yeah, it really is.
The fallout from a canceled signing ceremony doesn't stay in Washington. It hits your local zoning board, your mortgage rate, and your polling place.
And, it leads us with a profound question regarding the future of how this country is governed.
Oh, so.
Well, as standalone, substantive bipartisan achievements like the Road to Housing Act increasingly become hostages to deeply partisan base rallying demands like the Save America Act,
Yeah.
are we witnessing the definitive end of the traditional win-win legislative compromise?
Oh, wow.
If every single bill, no matter how universally supported or economically vital, is treated merely as leverage for something entirely unrelated?
How does anything get done?
Exactly. How can a divided nation ever solve its most basic infrastructure or economic crises?
If you found this episode valuable, please like, subscribe, share, follow, and turn on notifications. It helps us continue bringing you content like this and ensures you never miss future releases.